welcome to the AskALLi Advice podcast today, self-publishing fiction and nonfiction, and I'm here with Dan Blank from We Grow Media. Hi, Dan.
How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. And you?
Very good. Beautiful day here in New Jersey.
Oh, is it just not so good here in London? Rain, rain, rain. What time of the day is it there?
You're on brand. It's 2 p.m.
We're on brand. Yes, we are, as ever. Summer rain, yeah. Well, never mind. We've got books to console us and writing and all of that. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that I think every single one of us has to think about at some times. And we're constantly juggling and adjusting. And that is productivity, how to ensure we're getting the work that we want to get done, and perhaps even how to increase the amount of work that we are actually putting through our laptops and our book publishing platforms and so on. And I know this is something that you do a lot of work on with your authors, and I guess it's something you've had to think about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I've had We Grow Media for almost a decade now. So you being in a room and alone in a room, this is the only thing that supports my family. So it's a lot of time to have to figure out, how do you do the work you need to do? How do you plan the work for the future? How do you create? How do you do the boring administrative stuff? And it's all self-created. It's different than being in an office. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I've worked in an office, remember those people who they could just complain the whole day because their day was set, their agenda was set by others. You got to go to this meeting, got to do that, got to do this. So they sort of kept falling forward in jobs they hated for years. But I think if you do what you do, or if you do what the authors listening do, they have to get that gumption to find time to write, find the purpose to edit, to go through the publishing process, all the business stuff. And it is a difficult thing to get that kind of energy.
Yeah, and I think at the beginning, it's especially hard. So if we are talking to somebody who's maybe just setting out on this, I think it's worth saying that it does get easier. It's very much about building good habits. And we spoke about that last time, and we talk about habits lots.
Yep.
But one of the biggest challenges, I think, I mean, I'm doing this a long time and I've been a freelance most of my working life. Actually, I have had spells where I've gone into offices, but I've never managed to last very long. 2 years, I think, was the longest I ever managed anywhere. And while there is, some advantages in people organizing your time, for me, I definitely work better when I set my own goals, targets, and my own time. But I think the smartphone and the internet and all of these wonderful creative tools that have emerged, without which we couldn't do our work, have also really put some strain on on authors in terms of, I know so many people who find that at the end of the day, they've been kind of doing stuff all day, but they haven't done anything really. They haven't produced at the end of the day. So what we're going to be talking about during this session is very much tips and tools about how you ensure that that doesn't happen. And when I asked you about yours, you said, oh, I got a whole machine here to make sure that doesn't happen. So tell us about your system, first of all.
So I think the first thing is the idea of reaction versus intention. So it's this idea of starting with intention, of starting with what you know you want to accomplish. And it doesn't have to be as rigid as I'm about to explain it, but knowing what you want to accomplish in, say, a quarter, like a 3-month period and a month period, and more importantly, I think in a week or in a day. So that idea of intention means that, by the end of this week, I want to edit 20 pages and I want to reach out to this one other author. That idea of that simple thing that is the intention you're setting, because I think that with your mention of social media and digital tools, the problem is it's very easy to get harangued by reactive stuff, which is, look at all the email that came in, look at all the things that others are asking of me. Then there's that endorphin rush of, let me please them, let me live up to that expectation, let me be a good person. And the expense is almost always your writing, your editing, your publishing. And that's very depressing. So I think that with intention, one thing I'm a huge advocate of is I live by my calendar and I time block. So it's really a matter of setting intention by the half hour, an hour period. And I really write that down the night before. So there's like a a structured way to do it and a non-structured. But for me, it really is a matter of saying, today in my town, we vote today. We vote for the mayor. So in a typical day, I don't have time for that. I am busy attending to my business, my creative work, and my family. So if I just put it on a to-do list, I probably would not have gotten to the voting booth except for massive guilt. But I put it on my calendar. I blocked out a half hour to drive over there, vote, and come back. So if it wasn't on my calendar, it either would not have gotten done, or the whole day I'd play that horrible game with yourself of, oh, I've got to do that. Oh, should I bother? Is it worth it to do all that stuff that people do? And not with voting, just with anything. And when you put it on the calendar, what you're doing is you're assigning time to a task. And because maybe there's only a 8 or 12 or 15-hour portion of the day that you're going to be awake, like really doing stuff, you're working with a finite resource. So I set the intention by really time blocking, by looking at the day, saying, what can I do in a day? Well, I've got to get to that client work. I've got to write that. I've got to do this call. And you're playing with that finite thing instead of to-do lists. And I'm not a fan of to-do lists because to-do lists don't exist in reality. They mostly, to me, exist to make you feel guilty.
I completely agree. I'm not a fan of to-do lists, except I'm a big fan of the wish list, and making a long, long list of all the things you want to do, and then taking the calendar and looking at, as you say, at the time, and then lose the let go list. Then what I'm not going to be able to do, and somehow there's for me, there is a satisfaction in making that a conscious process. So, for years I kind of did that unconsciously. And for years I did just have lists and didn't do the time thing. And I can honestly say that when I started to match time to task was when productivity just changed completely for me. Up to that, there was kind of the diary and the list, but the two weren't brought together. And it's in that bringing together, I think, that's so important.
Yeah, I think a big thing there is matching expectations too. I mentioned this before the call. I run a mastermind group and we go through a lot of things with productivity, but we start the week by setting an intention. Like, what do you want to accomplish? What's the minimum you want to accomplish this week? And then we end the week with an assessment of how the week was. What worked well? What went horribly? What did you learn in the process? That sort of a thing. And I think the neat thing with intention is very often when people come into the mastermind, you find their intentions are kind of too big. Like, I'm going to finish editing my book. And it's like, whoa, what? No, I'm almost there. And they'll swear that they're almost there. And you're like, do you understand what finishing something really means? Like the closure of that? So we kind of create these minimum goals. And what you find is that it's better to put small intentions for a week that you can live up to, maybe exceed, than to put too much out there because you're like, well, I got to do it all. Look how important I am. And you don't get to it. And then you feel crushed. On the flip side, ending the week with an assessment, I think, allows you to. One thing I find is people do not give themselves enough credit. So they'll say, this week I was horrible. Didn't get to this, didn't get to that, didn't get to this. I only did this, and this. And you're like, oh my gosh, look at those 6 things you did. That one right there, I'm sure that was hard. That one's like, we tend to just end the day and end the week feeling bad about ourselves or bad about what we've gotten done. And I think that's a horrible way to live. Like, that's not a way to build yourself up as a writer.
It's not why we went into this, is it? To make ourselves feel bad. It was supposed to be the opposite. It's our escape from everybody else making us feel bad. We do a similar thing in the Go Creative in Business group. So on a Monday, we list our intentions under 3 headings: the maker, the manager, and the maximizer, which is the promotion end of things. Because those 3 hats have to be kind of juggled. And I like what you were saying about the time period. I'm a big fan of the day and the week, because I think you can kind of hold those in your head when you get to the month and the quarter, and definitely when you get to the year, you get a bit more kind of unrealistic. And I think exactly what you say happens in your mastermind group also happens in our group. And I'm as guilty as anybody else of putting in intentions under those three headings. I mean, I think the three headings is an acknowledgement of the fact that we have to break things down a bit in the first place.
Yeah.
But always a stretch goal for me, and, often not doing it or winding up doing something else entirely different or whatever. And that does happen with the creative process. I think it's important to say that as well. On a Saturday, then we do what we call our accomplishments for the week. And so important to kind of sift through the brain and give yourself credit, as you say, and just write down, well, I may have intended to do that and I didn't, but I did do this. And it's a really understanding and supportive group as well. Everybody's trying to do the same thing. And I think that's another productivity tip for everybody listening, is to surround yourself with other people who get it, who understand what you're trying to do. It's hard to do this stuff in complete isolation. You certainly do need to have that ability to stay on top of things and to take responsibility for things and to hold yourself accountable for things. But it really does help to have a supportive group around you who get it, who understand, and who are there to kind of pick you up when you fall down and give you a clap on the back when things go well, and all of that.
Yeah, I think that gives you permission. And I think that a lot of times we look at these amazing case studies online and interviews, and I do them as well. And you see the people who are killing it. They're doing it awesome. And you hold yourself to that standard. So of course it's hard to live up to that. And the thing that I see when you talk to even one other person, let alone a small group of 10 or 20 who are doing creative work too, is you realize like, oh, she struggles with that too. Or she hates that as well. Or that failed for her too. And that's not a negative. It's just like, oh gosh, I thought Facebook ads were supposed to be easy. I felt like a horrible hack and felt shame because I couldn't figure it out really quickly. It turns out these other three people couldn't quite get it to work like that either. I don't feel as bad. Maybe I'll stick with it, or I'll take a different tack, that sort of a thing. So that Absolutely. Permission, I think, it helps your productivity, because you're no longer in that am I good or bad conundrum, which is like a horrible thing to be in.
Yeah, which is so uncreative, because there is, the whole essence of doing things in a creative way is to recognize that it's all learning, and that everything you try and do is done in a sort of an experimental mode, an exploratory mode, and it's all learning, and it takes you to the next step, the next thing you needed to know in order to be able to do those Facebook ads well, or whatever. We have a lovely comment here from Tam May. To-do lists equals should-do list. That's what happens to me. And you're not alone there, Tam. And everybody, we would love to hear if you have productivity tips, things that have worked particularly well for you, or if you have a question for Dan or for me, or for us, just pop it there in the Facebook comments and we'll get to it through the show. So one of the things that I think is really important, that I don't think we do enough, is kind of preparing ourselves to be productive. You spoke earlier, and I think this is so important. Do you understand what it means to do what A, B, or C, whatever it is we're setting out to do? And often we don't really kind of get it, that it's going to take physical and mental energy and commitment and so on, and that preparing ourselves physically and mentally for the challenge that we've set ourselves is really, really helps us to get things across the line. Do you have any sort of prep rituals yourself, or anything interesting you've heard with your groups?
Yeah, so one thing is I'm a big believer in rest. I'm an early riser naturally, so I would not suggest someone, I don't like the advice of wake up an hour earlier, you'll find more time, because I think that we need rest. I think people are overstretched. But the thing I do, and most people I know work a day job and can't do it, I take a nap every day. I've done this for well more than a decade. It is non-negotiable. It's 7 days a week.
What time and for how long?
So typically it's around 11 a.m. It's before lunch, and it's generally a half hour start to finish in terms of I have a chaise lounge here, and I align it. So I just totally turn off. I watch YouTube videos that are mindless, nothing educational. And I just kind of turn off, and then I'll nap for maybe 10 minutes. And it's a very short period of time. But what I find is having permission to turn your brain off. Midday is a reset. And 11 a.m., I start working at like maybe 5:30 a.m. So that's kind of midday for me. It's nice to look forward to that permission to just reset. And I do find that if I close my eyes and nod off, even if it's for a minute, I wake up, not everyone would wake up this way, and I feel refreshed and I'm ready to tackle it again. And it's nice having that kind of, I don't know if you call it a siesta kind of in the middle of the day where you're allowed to do that. And I think that it allows you to realize too, like, it's not normal to wake up at 5 and to not go to sleep until 11:30. Like if you feel strung out, maybe there's a reason for it, a physical reason.
Absolutely. I'm a napper. I have a nap every single day. It's non-negotiable. It's one of my favorite hours of the day. I nap for longer. I take a full hour and
Good for you. I love that.
yeah, and I'll go off with some tinkly music, some meditation-y kind of thing that I fall asleep in the middle of it. And I might not always sleep for the full hour, though I often do, but I will stay in the resting state even if
Yeah.
I'm not actually asleep. And then, yes, I spring back in and the second half of the day begins. And for me, it's as much about being able to enjoy my evening when I finish work, so that I'm not before I got the day rest habit. I like to think of it in terms of day rest and night rest. And before I got the day rest habit, I was falling asleep when work was over. I was no fun, and it was my work never suffered. That always kind of seemed to roll on for me, but other aspects of my life were definitely suffering. And yeah, I encourage every creative to take some rest during the day because that switch off time, I don't know about you, but the ideas surface so often then too for me. I wake up with ideas, especially if I've gone to sleep with a problem. I often wake up with a solution.
What I did when I had a day job, so when I worked in Manhattan, I could not take a nap, obviously, but I took my lunch break. Like I took that lunch hour and I worked in a wonderful office, but people didn't take that. They ran downstairs to the horrible deli, got the same horrible sandwich, ate it at their desk over email. I got up and I left the office for a solid hour. So I couldn't nap, but I could get outside. And I think that has a similar effect. And it was a turnoff time. So I would say, I'm gonna walk all the way down those 21 blocks to an art gallery, spend a minute and a half there and walk back. I'm gonna walk to the river and back. I'm gonna walk up to Macy's and back. And it was the same thing of the permission to take a break. To me, it's very much a mental health thing that you are not on the treadmill of other people's expectations all day. Just this reminder once a day that you are a person, that you have that autonomy. Again, an hour is a very long time, even if it's for 4 minutes. Like we've got little kids at home. And I know the power of just having 4 minutes to yourself to just reset and be like, I'm an adult, I'm a person. They're up there, they're waiting all this stuff, but like, I'm still a person taking a break. I'm walking outside, then I'll go back in.
Absolutely. And it's back, I think, to that idea that, being busy is not necessarily being productive. In fact, busyness is possibly I think I saw a quote from Gretchen Rubin online yesterday or today saying that busyness is the biggest threat to our productivity now. And I agree with that. You cannot be creative. You can't do the deep stuff if you're constantly busy. That's just been proven over and again in studies that look at the actual brainwave activity, and when they look at creative waves versus the sort of standard or more the reptilian stuff. If you're busy, you're keeping yourself in that place where the best ideas don't rise, the insights are not as aha-ish. Essentially, everything we think of as creative isn't getting the chance to, because it's a very paradoxical thing. You can't force it. Actually surfaces when you take the reins off. And if we're constantly busy, constantly thinking, it just doesn't get its chance.
I mean, this is where I think that the way I time block works in as a mental health thing as well, because I think people don't fall asleep because they're sitting there trying to solve problems. They're thinking about things they feel, oh, I didn't get to that today, I'll do that tomorrow. For me, I time block the next day, the day before. So time blocking, recording this on a Tuesday? So I'm already time blocking by the time I leave here, but tomorrow will be time blocked. It's that idea that I can fall asleep because I'm not trying to remember things. And I'm not guilty where I'm like, oh, that client's waiting for something. It's blocked. So one, I know I'm going to attend to what I need to attend to tomorrow. But it also allows me to clear out my inbox because I can reply back. I'll send that thing to you by the end of day Wednesday. I've booked time Wednesday morning to do it. That means I've alleviated all the pressure in my own head of I've got to remember to do that. I've matched it to times. It's a mental health exercise, but it's also a social exercise because I can proactively, I've not done anything. I've done no work, but I can set an expectation knowing that I'm pleasing them, setting an expectation. That way I'm not like, oh, they're waiting for it. Let me stay up tonight and get it done because I think they're waiting for it. And I think that's the people I meet who are always under deadline. And I used to work with a lot of people like this. It's like every day is a fire drill. Some people have that life, and I know that, but a lot of people, it's this weird narrative of I'm needed. I've got to get it done. And they kind of mismanage their time because of that. And I think it's a mental health thing to set the expectation.
Absolutely. I think that's great. I think also time blocking the day before, you're actually giving what's going to happen tomorrow to your subconscious mind to sleep on overnight. And often you wake up with stuff that, if you didn't time block, you wouldn't have. And I think we underestimate as creatives the power of the subconscious. We don't use it consciously. So you can actually give your subconscious something that is bugging you, or your next plot twist, or, any kind of creative challenge, and sleep on it or take it for a run, or, there's so many more ways to solve something than just sitting there and kind of grinding away at it. We have a good question here from Bonnie. I'd be really interested to hear what you think on this one. What do you think about switching up the kind of tasks you focus on for periods of time? So, for example, working on graphics or images for a while and then switching to writing or editing.
Yeah. So one thing I focus a lot on the idea of creative energy. So what I notice is, I agree with her. That's a good idea. I tend to do it by time of day. I'm very creative in the morning. So the morning is all of my creative work. It's all the really important client work. So I block that out. I don't take meetings in the morning. So I've got a good 5-hour chunk or something like that. And then the afternoon, when I'm not as creative, I'm very good at reacting. So this call, for instance, is in the afternoon. Most of my client calls in the afternoon because I have notes in front of me. It's a conversation. I get to be very reactive. I get to clear out my inbox by the end of the day. I do it that way by kind of morning and afternoon, although I think she's giving a more nuanced view of different parts of your brain where, yeah, you write for an hour, then you clear out your inbox and do that. Then you do a business thing. So I think that can work. And it really depends on your personal preferences and also obviously your life. Everyone has a different lifestyle as well.
Yeah, and your sort of bodily rhythms and a lot of learning how to do this stuff and learning how to be productive is about getting to know yourself, and that's why sort of blanket productivity tips, do this, do that, doesn't work. Some things will work for you, some things won't, and you won't know until you try. I too like to vary tasks, so I tend to work in 90-minute sessions. And like you, I'm most creative first thing in the morning. I like to actually have absolutely nothing between me and whatever it is that's down for first. And first is always the thing that's not urgent, but important to me. And so it's generally my writing, poetry or fiction, or, something like that, or else something that I have decided this needs creative touch, it will go into that session. And two reasons for that: what you put down first tends to get done. If you leave it until later on, it's amazing. It just doesn't happen. But also because my brain actually is best for those kinds of tasks at that time of day. And then after that, it's parsed out in 90-minute blocks. And that includes, the nap. The hour has a kind of a quarter of an hour in and out where I'll be maybe eating or maybe doing something else. Kind of tend to divide the day up into that, because a lot of brain research shows that 90-minute cycles are natural through our waking brain and our sleeping brain. We move naturally, most of us, through 90-minute cycles. And so harnessing that seems to be a good thing and to work for me. And I will deliberately set up contrasting activities one after the other, because you get the refresh of going on to something different. It also means that if you're doing something that you kind of don't love to do, well, it's only 90 minutes and you can do it.
That's interesting. I'll break it out in smaller things too, where if it's something I really don't want to do for any reason, I'll do a tiny chunk. I'll do these 15-minute chunks just to work on it a little bit, and gets me past the irrational amount I've built it up. It's
I hate this. I don't want to do this. This hates
or it's
me.
just, it's like, oh, I've got to call the orthodontist to see if my kid needs braces. Well, of course you're putting that off because there's thousands of dollars on the line, so like you build it up to bigger than it is, which is it's literally a phone call, it's that sort of a thing. By the way, my kid needs braces.
Who knew? Okay, well, we've got about 5 minutes left. What is your top productivity tip? What's the one thing that maybe everybody listening should do, or what's the one thing that has been most useful for you?
That's a big one. So beyond the time blocking, one thing I would say is talk to someone else who's doing what you want to do. Because that's where I find the permission really comes in, where you go from all the systems and the this and the that. Oh, and nothing against this, here's the bullet journal. It's this incredible thing. Here's how Cindy used it. Here's how Johnny used it. Here's how Beth totally got her dream life. And I don't know anything about bullet journal. I'm sure it's amazing, but it's so easy to just feel like, oh, my life didn't change after that. And when you talk to someone, you have the conversations, honestly, I find that parents have, which is, hey, does your 5-year-old sleep through the night? And they're like, no, of course not. Does your 4-year-old have a well-rounded meal? No, of course not. And you have the more nuanced view of like, oh, everyone's struggling with this. And I think that helps to know. And you find out like what really works and where you set your expectations. So my tip for that is really to talk to a lot of people. And something I do a lot is I talk to a lot of writers. I talk to a lot of people, like yourself, who they kind of run their own thing. And what you find is that the reality of that is so different from the perception in our minds. So we get to recalibrate, what can I do? And I think also in a very positive way, we can push ourselves to realize, what does it take? This is something I look at with creative work as well. I've probably mentioned this many times before, where I've been obsessed about learning how to properly play the guitar. And the more that I've dug into this, the more I realize, oh, it took more than I thought it would take. It takes a lot more boring rote practice than I thought it would. But when you hear that again and again from other guitar players, I'm interviewing a friend on Instagram, tell me specifically your guitar practice. And this guy's amazing. He's like, every day I always use a metronome. Now, metronomes are horrible. They're horrible things in this culture, this beep, beep. It's like a perception. But to hear, wow, he uses a metronome. He writes down what his practice will be each day. He practices while watching movies. He keeps a journal. And when I look at him, if I didn't know that, what I'd think is he's amazing. I'm horrible. I'm not doing it right. When you talk to him, you realize like, oh, he's really working at it. So there's also a positive thing there as well. It's like if you feel out of shape, and you see your friend who's really in shape, you probably don't like them very much sometimes. But you say, how do you do it? What you're going to find is like, oh, how does she do it? She wakes up at 4:30 every day. She jogs 6 miles. Then she puts her 3 kids on the bus to school. Then she goes to you realize, oh, it's not easy for her. She is working really hard, and that could inspire you to work differently at it as well.
Absolutely. And talk to her and find out how she made it work for her, and it can spark ideas about how you can do that. So that's a really brilliant sort of what I might call psychological tip. And I'm going to give a very, very practical one, which is no social or email until after midday. So spend your morning doing your stuff and leave everybody else's stuff, because an email is basically somebody else's stuff.
I love
Leave
that.
everything else until the afternoon. I don't do it every day, but the days I do it are the best days, and I try to do it every day. And I think that's the final thing as well. You will try to do a lot of things, and there will be lots of days where you won't do it, but that doesn't matter. Next day, you kind of try again.
I'm with you.
Okay, so that's it. We are out of time. We won't have a session in July. In July, we do our Encore month, but we will be back live here on Facebook on the first Tuesday at this time. In what month are we in now, Dan? Help me here. Yeah, we're
June?
not July, so in August. First Tuesday in
Oh,
August is when we are going to see you again for another session on self-publishing fiction and nonfiction. So it would be great, guys, if you have any good tips, please do leave them in the live comments there on Facebook. And thank you so much. Happy writing, happy publishing.